My name is Lauren, and I always thought being dependable was a strength, until it became the chain that kept me financially tethered to my family's mistakes. At a quiet dinner in Connecticut, my father called me generous, seconds before announcing I'd be paying half of my sister's $60,000 wedding. The worst part, no one even asked if I was okay with it. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Candles flickered gently, their soft light dancing over the polished mahogany table. My mother had insisted on a candlelit dinner to make it special, and I had foolishly hoped that meant something heartfelt was coming. Maybe a simple thank you. Maybe a warm family moment, for once not tied to some veiled expectation. Instead, my father raised his glass of Pinot and looked at me with that trademark grin of his, equal parts charm and control. Lauren's always been the rock of this family. And now she's stepping up again, splitting the wedding cost with me, $30,000 each for our Kelsey's big day. The clink of silverware against china froze. My smile, half-formed, polite, stayed there, suspended in betrayal. Kelsey, my younger sister by 6 years, let out a squeal across the table. My mother clasped her hands and beamed like she'd just won something. "You're always so dependable, sweetheart," she purred, patting my hand like I just volunteered to give my kidney, not my bank account. I blinked, just once. Enough to keep the tears at bay. Enough to buy a few seconds while my stomach twisted into a knot of something between disbelief and nausea. "I'm sorry, what?" I finally said, aiming for composure, but my voice betrayed me. It cracked like the fine china on my plate would if I dropped it. My father's smile didn't even falter. "You and I partners, it's only fair. After all, she's your sister." I felt the words I never agreed to that forming in my throat, but I swallowed them. Hard. Kelsey was already halfway through describing the venue, some converted barn with chandeliers made from antique ladders, and the music she wanted for her second outfit change. And I just sat there, like I always did. It wasn't the money that broke me. Not exactly. I make a good living, project manager at a private aerospace firm, and I've always been careful. It was the assumption, the complete lack of consent, the way they'd turned my silence into agreement and my stability into obligation. That dinner table suddenly felt like a courtroom. I was being sentenced, and my crime was being the reliable one. I glanced at my wineglass, still full. My appetite had vanished. Across the table, Kelsey was laughing with her fiancé, oblivious. She wore our grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones I was supposed to inherit, the ones she'd borrowed and never returned. The moment stretched. My mother reached for the salad bowl like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been volunteered for a $30,000 commitment without my consent. I wanted to scream, or flip the table, or walk out. But instead, I folded my napkin carefully on my lap and asked, "When's the deposit due?" My father looked pleased. My mother exhaled with relief. Kelsey gave me a wink. No one noticed my clenched jaw, or the way my fingers trembled slightly as I took a sip of wine I didn't even taste. I didn't give an answer that night, but in my head something had started shifting. Not a loud revolution, a quiet, undeniable crack, because this time I wasn't sure I'd fold. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, not because of work, not because of my alarm. My body just refused to let me sleep through the nausea curling in my gut. I leashed Jasper, my golden retriever mix, and stepped out into the crisp Connecticut morning, the kind that smells like frost and wood smoke. The air was clean, too clean, like nothing bad could exist in a neighborhood with manicured lawns and seasonal wreaths on every front door. We walked past the yellow house where Mrs. Langley was already pruning her hedges in pearls, past the brick one with the toddler tricycle eternally parked in the driveway. Jasper sniffed everything. I envied him. At least he could live moment to moment. Me? I was stuck somewhere between rage and resignation. I told myself this was just one last thing, one final favor for the family, like co-signing Dad's loan when he just needed help consolidating debt, or when I covered Kelsey's back rent in Boston after she quit her job at the salon because her boss had negative energy, or when I paid off the last $2,300 of Mom's credit card after she accidentally booked a luxury cruise they couldn't afford. I'd called it love once, loyalty, family. Now I wasn't so sure. Jasper tugged ahead, chasing a squirrel, and I let him. My boots crunched over the sidewalk. Leaves fluttered from the trees like reminders of how easily things fall apart. I found myself thinking back to college. Junior year, when I missed out on studying abroad because Dad needed help paying off the second mortgage. I told my friends I didn't want to go. I lied. I always lied to myself. That's what the dependable one does. She doesn't complain. She doesn't make scenes at candlelit dinners. She doesn't tell her mother that being called reliable sounds less like a compliment and more like a life sentence. I reached the cul-de-sac where Jasper always does his dramatic sit-down, refusing to turn back unless bribed with a treat. As he flopped down like he owned the block, I sat beside him on the curb. And it hit me. They didn't ask me to split the wedding cost. They told me I would. They didn't request help, they expected it, like my bank account was just another family asset. Like my paycheck came with a built-in family tithe. I wasn't a daughter. I was a silent wallet. Jasper leaned into my side, sensing the shift in my breathing. I stroked his fur, grounding myself. Maybe it really was just one last thing, but something in me doubted that. Kelsey and Dad didn't believe in limits, not when I'd never shown them any. As I stood up and turned toward home, my phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Thanks again for being such a lifesaver last night. Your father was so proud. Love you." Proud. Proud of what? My silence, my compliance. Love you. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and walked on, my pace quicker now. The sky had brightened, but the chill inside me lingered. I knew then what I hadn't let myself admit at dinner. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. I didn't want to go. I told myself that half a dozen times as I stared at the RSVP card taped to my fridge, brunch with the bridal party, Lakeside Cafe, 11 am. Dress code. Garden chic. Whatever that meant. But I went anyway. Because that's what Lauren does. She shows up. Even when her gut says don't. The cafe overlooked Lake Hemsworth, one of those picture-perfect Connecticut backdrops that looks better on Instagram than it feels in person. Sunlight sparkled on the water like a cruel joke. Inside, the cafe buzzed with the overdone energy of bridal pre-celebration, floral centerpieces, themed cupcakes, and a mimosa bar that screamed, "Look how perfect everything is." I wore a blush pink sweater dress. Safe, forgettable. I wanted to blend into the wallpaper. Kelsey was already holding court at the center table, surrounded by her college friends, all wearing coordinated floral dresses and drinking like this was some kind of sorority reunion. She spotted me and waved dramatically. "Lauren, you made it." Of course I did. I sat at the far end of the table, next to a girl named Taylor who vaguely remembered meeting me at Kelsey's 27th birthday. She was polite, asked what I did for work. I gave her my usual vague answer, project management, aerospace sector, and that was enough to lose her interest. Across the table, I heard giggles. Wait, Lauren's the one who's like, basically a corporate boss lady, right?" One girl laughed, twirling her straw. "But doesn't date like ever." "Poor Lauren," another chimed in, mock pouting. "She forgot to live while she was busy collecting direct deposits." Laughter. It wasn't cruel exactly. Just the kind of offhand, casual disrespect that cuts deeper because it's wrapped in sugar. I looked at Kelsey. She didn't say anything. Didn't defend me. Just smiled and took a sip of her drink like it didn't concern her. I should have said something. I should have stood up and called them out. But my tongue felt like stone. So I smiled. That brittle, robotic smile I'd perfected over years of family events where I was the invisible glue holding things together. Taylor leaned in. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "Totally." But I was. Then came the toast. One of Kelsey's friends clinked her glass with a butter knife and rose with theatrical flair. "To Kelsey," she began, swaying slightly with tipsy confidence, who never settles, who waited for the kind of love that sweeps you off your feet, who lives big, loves hard, and never lets life pass her by. Here's to not waiting too long. A round of laughter, applause. Kelsey stood and curtsied, her eyes sweeping the table. And landing on me, she raised her glass. "To the best sister in the world," she said, "without whom none of this would be possible." My stomach dropped. Was that gratitude or a slap disguised as a compliment? Everyone clapped again, except me. I took a slow sip of my mimosa, the champagne biting. The orange juice did nothing to sweeten it. No one noticed I didn't raise my glass. Kelsey sat down and went back to giggling with her friends. I watched her laugh like she didn't just slice me open with a toast. Like she hadn't offered up my financial contributions as a punchline. I excused myself soon after, quietly, politely. No scene, no drama, just a short walk past the lake, wind in my face, hands trembling in my coat pockets. That brunch was supposed to be a celebration, but all I could feel was grief, not just for my money, for what I'd let them turn me into, a sponsor, a seat filler, a dependable ghost. I spent the rest of that Sunday in sweats, curled on my sectional, watching a show I couldn't follow and sipping lukewarm tea that tasted like nothing. Jasper was curled at my feet, his rhythmic breathing the only calm thing in the room. But I wasn't calm. Not after that brunch. Not after Kelsey toasted me like a trust fund. By nightfall, the unease in my stomach had hardened into something sharper, something more alert. Like my body knew something I hadn't let my mind fully accept yet. So I opened my laptop. It started as a distraction, a simple habit. Every month I review my budget, update my tracking spreadsheet, make sure everything's aligned. Nerdy, maybe. But when your family treats your income like a public resource, you learn to stay vigilant. I logged into my bank account expecting the usual, but something wasn't right. A mortgage debit $2 $157.86 listed under a familiar address, my parents' address. The same amount appeared the month before, and the month before that, my pulse quickened. I clicked through, trying to retrace the history. 6 months worth of mortgage payments, all tied to my account. Auto pay set up under my name, but I'd never authorized it, not once. I called the bank, barely disguising the shake in my voice. Hi, yes, there are recurring payments I didn't authorize. Can you tell me how these transfers were initiated? The woman on the line was polite. Too polite. After a moment of clicking, she said, "It appears these were set up via online banking. Your account credentials were used." I froze. My login credentials? Yes, ma'am, through the desktop portal. I hadn't logged in from my parents' house in over a year, and there it was. The pit forming in my stomach opened wide. They hadn't asked. They hadn't even hinted. They'd just rerouted my money, like I was a faucet they could twist on at will. As I stared at the transaction history, my breath came shorter. It felt like betrayal, but not the shocking kind. This was the slow, calculated betrayal of people who know you won't fight back, people who bet on your silence. I ended the call. My ears were buzzing, my chest tight. Then I opened my email and started scanning through my statements. There were other things, small, almost imperceptible shifts. A second utilities account opened in my name 3 months ago. An insurance auto-renewal I didn't recognize. Everything legal, everything traceable, but none of it mine. And all of it theirs. That was when I realized it wasn't just about the wedding. It never was. They'd been siphoning off pieces of me for years. A slow erosion of boundaries disguised as family obligations. And I'd let it happen because, well, I loved them. But love without respect is just exploitation in better lighting. I scrolled back up to the most recent mortgage charge and took a screenshot. Then I opened a folder titled Home Docs and started compiling every transaction, every inconsistency, every digital breadcrumb. I was scared, but I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Somewhere between page 2 and 3 of my statement exports, Jasper lifted his head and nudged my knee. "I know, buddy," I whispered, stroking his ears. "We're not going to pretend anymore." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there with my laptop glowing in the dark and a quiet certainty blooming in my chest. They decrossed a line. And this time I had proof. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bank statements again. That steady stream of money leaking out of my account, quietly, efficiently, like it had every right to be there. I kept waiting for the familiar wave of guilt to crash over me. But it didn't come. Instead, something else settled in, a strange calm. Like the moment right before a thunderstorm, when the wind stills and the birds disappear. The next evening, I drove over to my parents' house. Not for dinner, not for a visit, just to ask one question. My mother was in the kitchen, as always, stirring something on the stove while the TV droned from the other room. The kitchen looked the same as it always had, photos on the fridge, a chipped rooster timer on the counter, the scent of rosemary and lemon from whatever she was cooking. It felt like walking into a time capsule. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, glancing up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You hungry?" "No," I said. "I just need to ask you something." She raised an eyebrow but didn't stop stirring. "I noticed mortgage payments have been coming out of my account," I said, keeping my voice even. "Do you know anything about that?" A beat. Then, too, she didn't look surprised. "Oh, that," she said lightly, turning the burner down. "It's just how your father keeps things afloat. He set up a system so things don't fall through the cracks. You know how forgetful he is." Forgetful, that was the excuse. I stepped closer. "He used my account, Mom, without telling me." She waved a hand like she was swatting at a mosquito. "It's all in the family, Lauren. You know your father. He gets overwhelmed. These are just temporary solutions until we get things sorted." I stared at her. "You think that's okay?" She sighed, finally setting the spoon down. "You've always had such a strong reaction to things. It's not like anyone's stealing from you. We're family. Families help each other." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or ask her if she even heard herself. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at the kettle on the stove. The water was starting to bubble, tiny movements, like the kind I'd been ignoring inside myself for years. "You didn't even ask," I said quietly. She turned back to the stove as if the conversation bored her now. "We didn't think we had to. You're always so reliable." There it was again, that word, reliable. It wasn't a compliment, it was a collar. The kettle let out a low, warning hiss. "I'm not a backup plan," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'm not a failsafe, and I'm not your safety net." She stiffened but didn't turn around. "Your father's doing his best." "His best doesn't include robbing me of my autonomy," I said. "You may not see it that way, but that's what this is." The kettle began to whistle. She still wouldn't face me. "You've always been the one we could count on, Lauren. Why change that now?" And that's when I realized she really didn't get it. To her, I was a role, a function, not a person with limits or boundaries or a say in where her money went. I reached over and turned off the burner. The whistle faded into silence. "I'm going to fix this," I said, "whether you support me or not." That finally made her turn. She looked tired. Not angry, not apologetic, just weary, like I was causing more trouble than I was worth. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "No," I replied. "You already did that. I'm just not pretending anymore." She didn't speak, didn't stop me as I walked toward the door. But just before I left, she said something that stuck with me. "Don't burn bridges you'll regret later." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "I'm not burning bridges," I said. "I'm building boundaries." And then I walked out. Felicia Bryant's office didn't look like I imagined it would. No heavy oak furniture, no towering law books bound in cracked leather. Instead, the walls were lined with sleek floating shelves and framed photos of her running marathons in different cities: Boston, Chicago, Portland. Everything about the space said, "I don't waste time proving I'm powerful. I just am." She offered me a chair and a glass of cucumber water, then got straight to the point. "So walk me through it. No edits, just your version start to finish." I told her everything. The dinner, the wedding cost announcement, the mortgage payments, the unauthorized auto transfers. I even admitted to how long I'd been the financial fallback for my family, how I'd covered debts, bailaid out my dad more than once, and kept Kelsey afloat during her jobless years. I watched her take notes with quiet efficiency, never interrupting, just nodding every now and then. When I finally stopped talking, I expected her to tell me I was overreacting, that it wasn't illegal, just messy or uncomfortable. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and said, "They're exploiting you." The words hit like an unexpected gust of wind. Cold, bracing, honest. "Lauren," she said gently, "what you're describing isn't just poor boundaries, it's financial manipulation. And the fact that they accessed your accounts without consent, that could be considered fraud." I blinked. "But it's my dad." Her expression didn't change. "Family doesn't excuse consent. If anything, it makes the betrayal worse." I stared at the sleek desk between us, my heart thudding. Somewhere beneath the shame and fatigue, I felt something new rise up. Validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being used. Felicia walked me through options. Power of attorney revocation. Legal control over the house if my name was on any documents. which, thanks to a panicked refinance 2 years ago, it was. She promised to draft a cease and desist for any further access to my bank accounts and start preparing documentation to transfer authority over the home into my hands, legally, cleanly, irrevocably. "You won't need to go nuclear," she said, "but you will need to be firm and ready." I nodded, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "I am." As we finalized the first round of paperwork, I glanced out her office window. The city skyline rose in layers, glass and steel against the early autumn clouds. Somewhere in that view, I saw a version of myself I hadn't met yet. The woman who didn't flinch. The woman who didn't ask permission to protect what was hers. By the time I left Felicia's office, I had a folder under my arm and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Real, earned, grounded control. Back home, I fed Jasper and sat on the couch with a fresh cup of tea. I opened the folder and stared at the temporary control documents, the cease and desist draft, the bulletproof plan Felicia had started to map out. I should have been scared, but all I felt was tired and strangely proud, because finally I wasn't waiting for someone to rescue me. I was rescuing myself. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale inn that looked like something pulled from a Hallmark movie, whitewashed brick, twinkle lights on every tree, and gold-rimmed name cards at every place setting. The whole place smelled like roses and roasted duck, like effort, like money, and a lot of it my money. I arrived early, partly to avoid making an entrance, partly to anchor myself. I wore a navy satin dress, understated but crisp, with heels that made my back ache just enough to keep me alert. I tucked my anger behind a smile so practiced I barely recognized it as mine. Fake it, float, watch, the game had begun. "Lauren," Kelsey air-kissed my cheek like we were distant cousins. "You look amazing. Oh, did you get your hair done?" "Just a brush and a flat iron," I said coolly. "Didn't want to outshine the bride." She laughed, not catching the undercurrent. "You could never. I'm just glad you're here." So was everyone else. My parents acted as if nothing was amiss. Dad greeted me with a warm clap on the back, offering me a flute of champagne. Mom leaned in to say how classy I looked. No mention of our last conversation. No mention of the legal documents currently being notarized downtown. Just smiles, choreographed, comfortable. I took my seat, smiling for the cousins, nodding at the neighbors, clinking glasses when prompted. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely, measuring each interaction, watching every glance, clocking the tiny tells. And my father. He couldn't meet my eyes. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, cracking jokes, toasting with the groom's family. But whenever our paths crossed, his gaze slipped sideways. Just once during a lull in conversation, I caught him glancing at me with something almost like fear. Good, let him feel it. Let him wonder what I knew and what I'd do with it. Throughout the night, I played the part. I nodded along during the speeches. I posed for pictures beside Kelsey like nothing had changed. When the photographer called for a sister shot, I leaned in close and whispered in her ear, "You might want to get this one framed. It'll be worth something one day." She laughed. "God, you're so weird tonight." I just smiled for the camera. The truth was, I was done warning anyone. Let them enjoy the rehearsal. Let them savor the sparkle. Tomorrow, the music would play and the guests would dance, but I wouldn't be the fool clapping from the corner. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already shifting. Later, during dessert, I caught a quiet moment with the groom, Evan, by the bar. He was nervously adjusting his cufflinks, clearly overwhelmed by the whole production. "You holding up okay?" I asked gently. He gave me a tight smile. "Trying to. Your sister's got a vision and it's full throttle." "She always did," I said, sipping my drink. He looked at me, studying me a little too long. "She told me you were covering a big part of the wedding. That's really generous." "Is that what she told you?" I asked, tilting my head. He hesitated. "She said you insisted that it was kind of your gift." My jaw twitched. "Well," I said after a moment, "let's just say the truth is a little less poetic." He didn't press. But something passed between us, recognition maybe, or pity. I didn't want either, so I walked away. Outside, the air was sharp with early fall. I stood beneath one of the fairy-lit trees, looking back at the windows glowing with warmth, filled with people clinking glasses, smiling for a future they thought they controlled. My phone buzzed, a message from Felicia. Docs signed. You're legally protected. They won't see it coming. Proud of you. I stared at it, the words swimming a bit as emotion rushed to the surface. Not sadness, not guilt, just relief. I was no longer waiting for someone to take care of me. I was no longer pretending this family operated on anything close to mutual respect. This wasn't a war. Not yet. But it was a shift. A new truth blooming quietly beneath the pretense. And I wasn't going to bury it to keep anyone comfortable. Not anymore. If the rehearsal dinner was polished, the wedding was a spectacle. The ceremony took place beneath a floral arch at a vineyard just outside of town. Rows of white chairs lined the lawn, every guest dressed in curated pastels. Kelsey floated down the aisle like a Pinterest board come to life. I stood beside her in my slate blue maid of honor gown, bouquet in hand, face neutral. Smile for the camera. Blink away the truth. Let the day be beautiful for now. The reception followed in a glass-walled pavilion strung with thousands of tiny lights. The DJ spun love songs while servers floated around with champagne and hors d'oeuvres so delicate they looked like jewelry. Guests snapped selfies against a backdrop of fresh roses and gold lettering. The Callahans, S 2025. I drank slowly, never more than a few sips. I needed my mind sharp, clear, because tonight I knew the illusion would finally crack. It always does when people drink too much in expensive clothes. The first sign came early. Evan's best man, clearly tipsy, mentioned to me in passing, "Your dad's been going hard at the bar all night." Keep saying something about family legacy and making it count. I smiled politely. Inside, I braced. And then it came. During dinner, after the toasts and the father-daughter dance, my father stumbled onto the stage with a microphone in hand. He tapped it like he was about to host a game show. The room went quiet. "Just want to say something," he slurred, raising his glass. "Tonight isn't just about a wedding. It's about the future of our family. And I gotta say, Kelsey. She's the one carrying the torch, the only one giving us grandbabies, building a life, making a real legacy." Laughter rippled across the room, polite and confused, but my table fell into a hush. Dad squinted toward me, glass raised. "No offense, Lauren, we all know you're the career woman, too busy for love, right?" A few people chuckled awkwardly. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I didn't give him the satisfaction. He didn't even notice. He turned back to the crowd. "Tonight, I'm proud to celebrate the daughter who's building the real future. The one who's giving this family something to remember." Applause, scattered, unsure. I stared at my plate, fingers curled around the stem of my glass, heart pounding. He sat down 2 tables away, already reaching for another drink. And I felt it then, that deep, bone-level shift, the click of finality. Because in that moment, I saw the truth. All my years of sacrifice had bought me silence. Not respect, not admiration, just invisibility. The woman who pays, the woman who doesn't build legacy. The woman who fades into the background so the golden child can shine. My hands were shaking. Across the room, Kelsey caught my eye. Her smile faltered. And that's when the second shift happened, because she saw it. Saw me fully, maybe for the first time. And I saw something in her face too, panic. Not guilt, not compassion. Panic, because she knew I was done. I stood up quietly and walked toward the exit, needing air. Something cold, something real. Outside, I sat on the stone steps, clutching my purse like an anchor. The night sky was clear, stars brilliant. The kind of sky you want someone to marvel at beside you. I was alone, but not powerless. I had the documents, the paper trail, the legal leverage. More than that, I had clarity. And clarity is dangerous to people who thrive on your silence. Behind me, the music shifted into a slow dance. Laughter spilled out through the doors, but I stayed where I was. Until I heard the footsteps. Kelsey. She stepped outside, heels clacking on the stone, dress clutched in one hand. Her smile was brittle now, her voice soft. "Hey, can we talk?" I looked at her. This woman I'd once braided hair for stayed up late helping with college essays, covered rent for, fed when she was too lost to feed herself. My sister. My tether. And maybe the first domino in all of this, I stood up slowly. "Sure," I said. And just like that, the first quarrel of our adult lives began. The morning after the wedding, I woke to the sound of Jasper's claws clicking softly against the hardwood floors. A fog of fatigue pressed against my skull, but not from alcohol. I'd barely touched a drink. It was emotional hangover, the kind that settles deep and doesn't budge. I padded down the hallway in my robe, clutching a mug of coffee like it was armor. Then I saw it. A white envelope slipped under my front door. Plain. No return address. I bent down, heart already quickening. As soon as I picked it up, I knew what it was. The paper was stiff, heavy, official. I peeled it open slowly, already bracing. Notice of foreclosure proceeding property, 741 Riverstone Lane lender, Mid-Connect Mortgage Solutions outstanding balance, 23,481.07 immediate action required. The room tipped sideways. It was their address. My parents' house. My childhood home. I read it again and again, the words refusing to soften. Their mortgage hadn't been paid in months. Payments had lapsed. Notices had been sent. And now the bank was ready to move forward. I stood there barefoot in my kitchen, the smell of stale coffee turning my stomach, this cold letter burning in my hands. So this was it. The crash landing I'd been propping them up to avoid. The one they knew was coming, but assumed I'd catch before it hit. And now, they were out of lifelines. The phone rang. As if on cue, I didn't need to check the caller ID. "Lauren," my mother's voice said, tight with urgency. We just got something from the bank. Have you seen it?" "Yes," I said. "It was waiting for me this morning." There was a pause. I could almost hear her blinking. "Why would you get it?" "Because my name is on the refinance paperwork, remember?" I said. "From 2 years ago, when Dad needed better rates and convinced me to co-sign." More silence. Then the shift. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice softening like syrup. "We didn't want to worry you. We thought we had it handled. But the wedding expenses, your father's business, things have just been tight." "You've known this was coming," I said, "and you let it get this far." Her tone sharpened. "We thought you'd step in if it got serious." I closed my eyes, fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "You mean you counted on it?" The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. "You need to come over," she said finally. "We have to figure this out. We can't lose the house. Your father's a mess." I didn't respond right away. Let her sit in it. Let her feel what panic without a savior feels like. "I'll think about it," I said and hung up. An hour later, they were at my door, both of them. My father looked old, not just tired, not just unshaven, but smaller, deflated. Like the man who once cheered at my science fair project had been replaced with a version who'd gambled too many hands and finally lost the table. My mother's lipstick was perfect, but her eyes were raw. They stood there like travelers who'd missed the last flight out of town. "You need to do something," my father said. No greeting, no apology. The audacity hit me like ice water. I stepped aside, letting them in. Jasper gave a low, unsure woof from the hallway. My parents looked at the stacks of folders and legal paperwork now spread across my dining table. Felicia's prep work, bank statements, transaction history, mortgage records in my name. The battlefield they never thought I'd build. "Lauren," my mother whispered. My father just stared. No excuses, no anger, just waiting. And for once I didn't fill the silence. I let it hang. Thick, cold. "You let this house fall apart," I said finally. "And you expected me to rescue you. Again." "We didn't have a choice," my father said quietly. "No," I corrected. "You didn't make one. There's a difference." My mother stepped forward. "Please, we can fix this if we act now." I looked at her then, really looked. And I realized she still thought there was a version of this story where I'd cave, where I'd clutch the family tight and pour the last of myself into the cracks. Not this time. I said nothing more, just handed her the notice. Let them hold the evidence of their own unraveling. They left 10 minutes later, the same way they arrived, tight-lipped and stunned. Like they couldn't believe the dependable one wasn't dependable anymore. But I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was just done. I didn't slam the door after them, but I did lock it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for doing so. The knock came just after sunset. Not loud, not urgent, but somehow I knew. I opened the door to find Kelsey standing there, arms folded, lips pressed tight like she was holding something back. She wasn't in her usual polished makeup or flowy dresses. Just leggings, a hoodie, and messy hair tied in a high bun. Real life had finally caught up to her wardrobe. "Can I come in?" she asked, eyes darting behind me like she wasn't sure if our parents were inside. I stepped aside, motioning her through. She sat stiffly at the kitchen island while I poured us both tea. Not because I felt sisterly, but because the ritual helped me stay grounded. She held her mug like a lifeline but didn't drink. "I heard about the foreclosure notice," she said quietly. "Mom's freaking out." "Is that why you're here?" She looked up sharply. "No, I mean yes, but not only. I wanted to talk, really talk." I leaned against the counter, waiting. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled through her nose like a yoga instructor preparing for a difficult pose. "I knew," she said finally. "About the mortgage payments, that Dad had stopped paying." The words hit harder than I expected, even after everything. "You knew." "I didn't know it was coming from your account," she rushed to add. "I swear I just thought he had it handled, that he'd figure something out before it got bad." I stared at her, heart beating in my throat. "I asked him about it last month," she continued. "He said not to worry, that Lauren's got it." My hands clenched around my mug. Of course he did. Kelsey looked genuinely uncomfortable now, biting at her thumbnail like she did when we were kids and didn't want to admit something. "I didn't mean to ignore it," she said. I guess I thought you were okay with it. You always step in, you always do." That sentence, that casual, damning sentence, sank like a stone. You always do. That was the rot at the center of it all. The mythology of me, the family's safety net, the backup plan, the fallback, dependable Lauren. "You never asked me," I said slowly. "Not once. You assumed I was okay with being robbed because I didn't scream about it." She winced. "I didn't think of it like that." "No," I said. "You didn't think at all." She looked down at her tea. "Do you know what it feels like," I continued, "to be praised for being strong, but only when that strength serves everyone but you?" Kelsey didn't answer, so I kept going. "To be the one who works the long hours, pays the bills, cleans up the messes, without being asked, without being thanked, and then get mocked for not having a husband or a baby or a real legacy. Do you have any idea how hollow that feels?" Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but I didn't stop. "You sat at that brunch and let your friends laugh at me. You toasted me like I was a charity donor, not your sister. And you let our parents treat my life like a resource to be mined." "I didn't mean—" "I know," I said, "but you didn't stop it either." Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever say no." That brought me to stillness, because there it was, the core truth. They never believed I'd walk away. They built their comfort on the certainty that I never would. I took a long breath. My voice came steadier now, not angry, just honest. "Well," I said, "I just did." Kelsey wiped her eyes quickly. "What happens now?" "That depends," I said, "on whether you want a sister or just a sponsor." She looked up, startled. "I'm not doing this anymore," I added. "Not the silent ATM, not the emotional punching bag. If you want a relationship, it starts with honesty and boundaries. Otherwise, we go our separate ways." Her voice trembled. "I don't want to lose you." "Then stop treating me like I'm disposable." I walked her to the door, not coldly but clearly. Before she stepped outside, she turned back and said, "I'm sorry. For all of it." I didn't say I forgave her. Not yet. Some bridges aren't ready for traffic the moment they're rebuilt. She left in silence. And this time I didn't feel gutted. I felt steady. The air in Felicia's office felt heavier that day. Not oppressive, just final. I sat across from my attorney, watching as she arranged 3 stacks of documents with methodical precision. Jasper was curled up in the backseat of my car downstairs, and my phone sat face down beside me, on Do Not Disturb. There would be no interruptions. Today I wasn't just confronting history, I was rewriting it. "Once they sign this," Felicia said, tapping the top sheet, "you will have full control over the property, legally, irrevocably. If they refuse, we initiate foreclosure proceedings and allow the house to be sold off." I nodded. "They won't refuse." Because they had no choice anymore. The house was months behind. The bank was circling. The only thing between them and complete collapse was me. Again. Only this time it would be on my terms. They arrived late, of course. My father in an old blazer, tie askew. My mother in pearls, holding a tissue she hadn't even bothered to pretend she wasn't using. Both looked like they hadn't slept. Both looked at me like I was the villain in a family drama that had once starred them. Felicia greeted them with a polite nod, professional and unreadable. "Let's begin," she said. My parents sat across from me, 2 people who had shaped my childhood, who had built a mythology around duty and sacrifice. But only when it served them. I watched them squirm as Felicia explained the documents. Transfer of authority, power of attorney rescinded, deed signed over, control of all financial matters related to the property placed in my name, legally binding, final. My father reached for a pen but paused. "So that's it," he said. "You want to own us now?" "No," I said. "I just want to stop being owned." My mother's lips trembled. "You're tearing the family apart." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, I'm finally holding it accountable." She turned away, dabbing her eyes with the tissue as if I were the cruel one. But Felicia didn't flinch. "Your daughter has every legal right to protect her assets," she said, "and every moral right to protect herself." They said nothing. The room was so quiet I could hear the scratch of the pen as my father finally signed his name. Then my mother slow, hesitant. "Done." Felicia gathered the pages into a folder and stood. "That's all," she said. "We'll file the changes with the county by end of week. You're dismissed." Dismissed. The word landed with a satisfying weight. My parents stood slowly. Neither looked at me. My mother whispered something about hope you can sleep at night, and my father muttered under his breath about ungratefulness. But I didn't flinch, didn't chase, didn't soften. I just sat there, hands folded, the folder still warm beside me. When the door closed behind them, I finally exhaled. Felicia turned to me, her voice lower now. "How do you feel?" I paused, then smiled. "Like I just unhooked a leech I didn't know was there." She nodded. "It's hard the first time. The guilt doesn't evaporate immediately, but the power, that settles fast." She was right. By the time I walked to my car, Jasper leapt up excitedly from the passenger seat. I buckled in beside him and glanced at the courthouse steps behind me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. And for someone who'd been raised to believe love was measured in what you gave up, freedom was the first real act of self-love I'd ever performed. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. And it was just the beginning. The living room looked exactly the same. Same taupe carpet that Mom insisted was neutral and timeless. Same sun-bleached curtains from a catalog they could never really afford. Same framed photos, Kelsey's graduation, my baby picture, a family trip to Lake George back when smiles were easier. But tonight it felt different, because this wasn't a family gathering. It was a reckoning. I sat in the armchair by the fireplace, the one that squeaked when you leaned too far back, while my parents took the sofa. Kelsey sat off to the side, arms crossed, ankle bouncing. No one spoke. Good. Let them sit in it. Let them feel the weight. When I finally did speak, my voice didn't waver. It didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I want to walk you through something," I began, "and I'm going to ask that you don't interrupt." No one moved. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my pocket, just one. It wasn't performative. It was factual, simple, a breakdown. I unfolded it slowly and began reading. May 2018, $4,200 debt consolidation loan payoff for Dad. August 2019, $1,750, Kelsey's rent after she left her job. March 2020, $3,300, car repair for Dad, emergency. July 2021, $5,000, credit card balance cleared. December 2021, $2,157, first mortgage payment auto-transferred from my account. Continued monthly through this year. I looked up. That totals over $45,000 in direct payments, not counting groceries, family vacations I funded, and every holiday where I picked up the bill while you said, "Lauren's got it." My mother's mouth opened. I raised a hand gently. I said no interruptions. She closed it. I continued. This wasn't support. This wasn't kindness. This was extraction. It was assumed. It was unspoken. And it was never once accompanied by true respect. I folded the paper again. Now let me be very clear. That ends today. My father shifted in his seat, finally looking me in the eye. "So what, you're cutting us off?" "No," I said, calm as glass. "I'm offering new terms." I let the sentence hang in the air like the scent of something burning. "If I choose to help in the future, it will be on my conditions. That means no more auto payments, no more silent expectations. If you need something, you ask clearly, honestly. And I will decide without guilt." Mom blinked at me, stunned. "Lauren," I cut her off softly. "I'm not punishing you, I'm protecting myself." Kelsey looked at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. because for once I wasn't deflecting with sarcasm or softening the blow. I wasn't negotiating, I was stating my terms, my boundaries, my life. Dad looked away, jaw tight. "You're making it sound like we're villains," he said. "No," I replied. "You're people who made choices repeatedly, and now I'm making mine." My mother dabbed her eyes again, that tissue finally losing its strength. "I just don't know when things got so cold," she whispered. I stood, slow and deliberate. "They didn't get cold," I said. "They just stopped being convenient for you." No one moved. No one stopped me as I walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back one last time. There will be no more support without my terms, and those terms start with respect. If you can give that, we can talk. If not, this is where we pause. No dramatics, no yelling, just a finality that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and let the autumn air hit my face like a baptism. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter. I felt like myself. A year later, my home is quieter, not silent, not empty, just quieter. The kind of quiet that settles into the walls when you stop waiting for something to go wrong. The kind that wraps around you, not like isolation, but like freedom. I'm setting the table for dinner, 3 plates, cloth napkins folded simply, a pot of butternut squash soup simmering on the stove. The dining room is warm, lit by soft light and the scent of rosemary and fresh bread. Jasper dozes by the window. A jazz record hums low in the background. This house, my house, feels different now. Not because of the renovations, though yes, I did finally replace the carpet and tear down those awful curtains, but because of what it doesn't hold anymore. No fear, no entitlement, no silent pressure pressing against every surface. I don't dread the knock on the door. I don't flinch at unknown numbers. And when I pay bills now, I do it knowing every dollar serves me, not a legacy I was tricked into maintaining. Tonight, my parents are coming for dinner. As guests, not as homeowners. Not as hosts, guests. And the difference is everything. They arrive on time, which feels like a miracle in itself. My mother brings a bottle of wine, my father brings an awkward smile. Neither of them walks in like they own the place, which is progress. I greet them calmly, usher them inside, and offer them tea. There's no tension in my voice, but no apology either. We sit down, and for a while we talk about neutral things, weather, local politics, Jasper's recent vet visit. There's a moment halfway through the meal where my mother looks around and says softly, "The house looks beautiful." I nod. "Thank you," she hesitates. "It's peaceful." I smile. That was the goal. They don't press, they don't pry, because they know now I don't bend anymore. The meal passes with surprising ease. No blow-ups, no guilt trips, just cautious conversation threaded with long pauses, moments where we all wonder how we got here and how fragile this version of us still is. But fragile isn't the same as broken. Fragile can still be repaired. After dessert, my father clears his throat. "You've done well, Lauren, with everything." It's not an apology, but it's something. "I know it doesn't fix anything," he adds, "but I see it now, what we put on you." I meet his gaze, and for the first time I believe him. "Thank you," I say. When they leave, there are no tears, no dramatic goodbyes, just coats, keys, and quiet.